Mike, thanks very much. Andres Ilves, editor of the BBC Somali Service, joins us now from Nairobi. Andres, good morning.
Good morning.
Tell us, first of all, it seems that we're winning the war against piracy in Somalia, are we?
Well, yes and no. I mean, as you know, piracy has been a big problem for years. Thousands of people, in fact, by some estimates, over 3,700 crew members from over 125 countries were basically taken hostage in the 7-year period since 2005, including almost 100 who were killed. Now, those numbers have been dropping in the past year. Actually, the ransom payments, they were quite high, but they went from 31 in 2011 to just 8 last year. Hijackings are down 30%, as you said. Things are down, but there are a couple of problems that persist. It's still happening. And in fact, oddly, the costs are still high because it's the cost of trying to avoid the piracy that's driving up the problem. So you have ships that are taking longer routes. They have increased security. They're spending more money to keep the piracy down.
And as the influence of was it a British Navy warship in the ocean there, an American warship as well, has that had any impact on all of this?
Yes, it has. Actually, it's, as you said, basically more military, more security, but there's a limit to how far people can take that, and it's costing the countries involved. So there have been these reports that were issued, 2 of them this week, in fact, one by the World Bank saying things are looking good, but actually we need to start focusing on the root cause of the problem, and that is, of course, the instability, ongoing instability in Somalia. And that everyone needs to be, if they're going to be spending money on this issue, some of it is going to be best spent on the root causes, economic issues, security issues on the coast. Basically, don't give the pirates a place to land.
What's the difference between Somalia and Somaliland?
On this issue or in general?
Just in general.
Well, here's the thing. See, as you know, the problems in Somalia, the ongoing violence and instability has been going on for decades. And at one point, in fact, there was a civil war, and the central government of Somalia ended up, in fact, bombing the capital of that part of what was then Somalia. In fact, there were 2 colonies once upon a time. There was the Italian colony, which has become what we know as Somalia, the southern part. And there was a British colony, which is now called Somaliland by those there. And basically, during that civil war, Somaliland split off. It was over 20 years ago, and they continue to maintain that they're a separate state. So they do everything on their own security, they staff their own borders and so on. But Somalia says, well, no, actually, you're not a separate country. You're still part of Somalia, and you can't go it alone. And after 20 years, there's no country in the world that says that Somaliland is a separate country, but they do say they are.
Can they go alone? Can they survive without Somalia?
Well, they've been doing quite well, but part of the problem is that the international community wants to see a stable Somalia and a Somalia that is united, and there's scant support for them to go it alone. So they're functioning pretty well on their own, but the rest of the world is saying, well, maybe it's time to just give it up because it's not really happening.
And Ethiopia's cobblers to the world?
Well, that's one of those things that there's some unexpected news coming out, which is, as a lot of people probably know, China produces a lot of the world's footwear. And now, in fact, a Chinese company has said that they're going to try to make Ethiopia a global hub for shoemaking. And they're investing $2 billion, or plan to, over the next few years, to build a shoe city in the capital, right outside the capital of Ethiopia. Addis Ababa, and they're going to basically accommodate 200,000 people and start producing lots and lots of shoes. So China, which at the moment produces about 2/3 of the world's shoes, one of their companies is saying, well, actually, why not have them be made in Ethiopia?
Is it just because of the cheap labor, or are there any other reasons?
Well, actually, they also cite the cheap electricity. So their number of production costs, they say, would be reduced in doing it from Ethiopia.
Is there a precedent for this? Are the Chinese companies, if you like, relocating part of the world's industry from China to Africa?
Well, actually, there is actually because Africa's biggest trading partner is now China, and China has been for years now investing in Africa, doing everything from building infrastructure, building stadiums and buildings. In some countries, China has built the ministry buildings actually, and they're also starting to have sort of different zones where they're beginning to move their production to Africa.
And China's neo-colonialism of Africa is not without its critics, not least when it comes to business. The Chinese have been criticized for importing their own managers, almost as if they can't trust the locals to run the business.
Well, it's interesting because in some places where you find the Chinese operating around the world, actually, there are entire tent cities that are built. They bring in not just the managers. In some cases, they bring in the workers and they fly them in, and the people live in tents and go to work every day. And when their work is done, all within a compound, at the end of their tour of duty, as it were, they go back to China.
And the local administrations are happy for this importation of workers, are they?
Well, I don't know if they're always happy, but it seems to be the way that things are headed, and the end result is often, a new building, for example. So it does work for them in some ways.
Does China, because of its financial clout, more or less get its own way in these East African countries?
Well, it's interesting. It does have quite a bit of clout, and it gets a friendly reception, frankly. The newly elected leader of China, Xi Jinping, his first trip outside, besides going to Moscow, was actually to go to China, to go to Africa. Granted, it was on his way to a conference in South Africa, but he did stop by Tanzania and emphasize the ongoing warm relationship between China and Africa.
Talking of the Horn of Africa, didn't the original man come from that part of the world?
Well, that's what scientists believe, yes. I mean, they're basically somewhere in the Rift Valley. All the archaeological evidence so far has been that that's probably where we ultimately all came from.
An original man brought with him or her original sound or original language.
Indeed, indeed. In fact, there's been a discovery, basically some scientists have made recently. There was a journal article saying actually, there's a sound that an animal, a primate called the gelada, makes that if you listen to it, it actually sounds like something that, well, I wouldn't exactly say it's close to human speech, but it does sound closer to human speech than anything else I've heard.
And this sound comes from what?
Well, apparently it's some type of lip smacking, as they call it. Basically, the primates rapidly move their jaws, lips, and tongues in, some people would say, much the same way that humans do when they speak.
I think we can hear it. Yeah, I can see why they say it sounds like human speech. Is that sound only made by Ethiopian monkeys?
Well, actually, it sounds like me before I've had my morning coffee.
Well, me too.
But indeed, thus far, they're the only animals that they have found that make a sound like that. But of course, this is, I'm sure, going to be the source of a lot of research to try to understand what this is, and is this where what you and I are doing right now, talking, is this where it started?
Yeah, but what are the scientists saying? What's their link between that speech and human beings? Is there one that they've come up with yet?
Well, see, that's the thing. I mean, now that they've captured these sounds, what they need to figure out is what does it mean? And so it's. I think that what's happened now is they can see that animals are capable of making a broader range of sounds than we thought, and some of those sounds sound like our speech. But does it have any meaning, or is it just a grunting sound or lip smacking? We don't know yet.
And is this connected to trying to see what the origins of man is or was?
Oh, very much so. I think what actually happened is that the scientists were hearing this, and pretty much anecdotally, they began to realize, wait a minute, this actually sounds like it could be vaguely familiar. But and now they're going to start looking into kind of what does this mean for us?
Do people over in that side of the world benefit from the idea that they are the home of the original man? I mean, is it a tourist attraction there or what? The Rift Valley?
Oh, I think it is. I think it is. I mean, people like to kind of see where various archaeologists have been and so on. And, you know, there are all sorts of famous scientists throughout the centuries who have gone here and done digs and so on. And certainly, I think there's a sense of pride that this is where it all started.
They don't show off about it, though, do they?
Well, no, I mean, it's a quiet pride, I think.
I'm just checking. Just checking. Good to speak to you.
Good to speak to you. Take care.
Thanks very much. That's Andres Ilves, there. He's the editor of the BBC Somali service.